Good morning, everyone. Tell a story about this very wealthy man who died. And at his funeral, there was one guy who was sobbing uncontrollably. So someone went over to him and said, "Sorry for your loss. You must be a close relative." He said, "No, I'm not related at all." He said, "So why are you crying so hard?" He said, "I'm crying because I'm not related to him." In this week's Parsha, Hashem says, "I'm going to take the Jewish people out of Egypt and I'll bring them to the land of Israel." And then the Torah says, "V'nasati osa lachem morasha." I'm going to give the land of Israel to the Jewish people as a morasha. Now, what is the meaning of the word morasha? It sounds like the word Yerusha, which is inheritance, but it's a morasha. And the meaning of a morasha is a heritage. I will give the land of Israel to the Jewish people as a heritage. There's one other time we find the word morasha in the Torah, and that's in the famous verse. Torah tziva lanu Moshe, morasha gilat Yaakov. The Torah that was given to us from God through Moshe is a morasha. It's not an inheritance, it's a heritage for the Jewish people. And so the question is, what is the difference between an inheritance versus a heritage? A Yerusha versus a morasha. And there are three basic differences. The first difference is that an inheritance you don't have to work for. You know what the Talmud says? If a relative dies, one of your close relatives, and God forbid, but they leave you a lot of money, you inherited a lot of money, you make two blessings. First, you make the blessing Dayan Emet, which is the blessing that mourners make when they receive bad news that someone died. You say, "I accept the judgment of Hashem." But then you make a Shashianu. I just became wealthy, I inherited a lot of money. So the two blessings go back to back. The idea is that you didn't work a minute for any of this money. Someone leaves you a large amount of money, effort-free. It's a gift. You don't have to toil. You don't have to work for that money. Heritage is something you don't get without work. You have to toil for it. You have to put in effort. When it comes to the land of Israel and the Torah, it's not an inheritance. Yeah, you have the Torah, but you have to toil and study Torah if you want to gain Torah. The land of Israel only comes through effort, through sacrifice. So therefore, a heritage requires effort as opposed to an inheritance that doesn't require any effort whatsoever. Second difference between a heritage and an inheritance, a morasha and Yerusha, is that when you inherit something, it's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. If you inherit money and you want to go gambling and squander it, that's your choice. It's your money. You inherit a diamond ring and you want to go to the pawn shop and sell it, it's yours. You can do what you want, but not a heritage. A heritage, a morasha, is like an heirloom. Imagine your great-grandmother gave you her candlesticks. You can't just go and melt down the gold and sell it. You have to make sure you keep these candlesticks. So your Zaydi gave you his Kiddush cup, right? You don't just go sell the Kiddush cup. You save it, you use it, you preserve it, and then you give it to your children and to your grandchildren. Same thing with morasha. The Torah in the land of Israel is ours as a gift from God, but it's a gift that we have to transmit, morasha, to be morashit, to transmit it to the next generation. We have to make sure that just like we received the Torah from our parents and grandparents, we give it on, pass it on to our children and grandchildren. Just like we received the land of Israel, we have to make sure our children and grandchildren have the entirety of the land of Israel. That's why we can't give away portions of Israel. It's not ours to give away. We have to make sure we preserve Eretz Yisrael for future generations. And finally, the third difference. An inheritance is an object. As an object, you have to own it first. You have to possess it before you could do anything with it. But not a heritage. You see, there were many generations of Jews that didn't have Eretz Yisrael. 2,000 years we were in exile. But they passed on a love for Eretz Yisrael. When they said L'Shana Abba Yerushalayim at the end of the Seder, at the end of the Yom Kippur, they passed on to something that children, it wasn't tangible, they weren't there. But they passed on a love for Israel. They passed on the idea or the ideal of Eretz Yisrael. And future generations came and received it because we passed on the love of Israel. Same thing with Torah. There were many parents who were not learned at all, but they had children who were great Torah scholars. How could you give your children something you don't have? Because they told their children, Torah is the best eschora. Torah is the best thing in the world. They inculcated in their children a love for Torah. So even though they were not learned, their children became great rabbis, great scholars, great Torah, Talmidei Chachamim. Why? Because they didn't possess Torah themselves, but they transmitted the ideal and the love of Torah to their children, and their children went and received it. So you don't have to physically possess it because it's not an object. You have to pass on the value and the love and the ideal of Torah to your children. I'll tell you a true story. Everyone knows the story of Eddie Jacobson. Eddie Jacobson was the man who influenced President Truman to vote for the state of Israel. He died in 1955, a young man, 64 years old. But he was in business with Harry Truman in Kansas City, had an old relationship, and when Israel wanted to be established, all the Jewish organizations called at him, said, we need you to go to Washington and persuade your old buddy. And it's a famous story in Jewish history. He was the one responsible, one man, multiple trips back and forth, influencing Harry Truman to vote for Israel. When he was on his deathbed, he turned to his daughter, and he said to his daughter, I'm sorry that I'm not leaving you an inheritance, because whatever money I saved up, I spent it on all those trips to Washington, airplanes and hotels, and he was loving for Israel. He says, I spent everything I have. I'm leaving you nothing, and I'm sorry that I'm leaving you nothing, no inheritance. And his daughter looked at him and said, Daddy, your legacy will be my inheritance. And that's the question we have to ask ourselves. It's one thing to leave your children material inheritance, but more importantly is, what is the heritage? What is the legacy, the spiritual inheritance that we will leave for our children and for our grandchildren?